Have you ever felt like the dynamic between you and your children has shifted in a way you never expected? You spend decades raising them, guiding them, and sacrificing so much to ensure they have the best possible future. But then, one day you realize something has changed. Maybe they stop listening to your advice. Perhaps they dismiss your opinions or even make you feel like a burden. It's painful, confusing, and frustrating. After everything you've done, how could they treat you this way? If you found yourself in this situation, you're not alone. Many parents experience a shift in their relationship with their adult children as they grow older. It's a harsh reality that as children become more independent, the balance of power in the relationship changes. The respect and admiration that once felt so natural may start to fade, replaced by indifference or even subtle condescension. You might feel tempted to remind them of all the sacrifices you made, the sleepless nights, the financial struggles, the countless moments when you put their needs above your own. But the truth is, demanding respect rarely works. If anything, it tends to make things worse. So what's the solution? The key isn't to fight for respect, it's to inspire it. Respect isn't earned through arguments or emotional pleas. It's cultivated through strength, confidence, and self-respect. When you carry yourself with dignity, set clear boundaries, and stop seeking validation from your children, they begin to see you differently. They start to respect you not because you demand it, but because you embody it. In this discussion, we'll explore 6 powerful yet simple actions you can take to regain respect from your children. These aren't manipulative tactics or quick fixes. They are shifts in mindset and behavior that will naturally restore balance in your relationship. From setting boundaries to building a fulfilling life outside of your children, these strategies will help you reclaim your sense of self and, in turn, earn the respect you deserve. It's never too late to redefine your relationship with your children and rediscover the respect that comes from living with strength and authenticity. Number 1, seeking approval from their children. One of the most common mistakes parents make, especially as they grow older, is constantly seeking approval from their children. It's natural to want to feel valued and appreciated after years of raising and supporting them. You might find yourself going out of your way to accommodate their needs, saying yes when you want to say no, or sacrificing your own comfort just to keep them happy. You may think that by giving more, they will respect you more. But in reality, the opposite often happens. When you constantly seek your children's approval, you unknowingly teach them that your feelings and needs come second to theirs. Over time, they begin to take your sacrifices for granted, seeing them not as acts of love, but as expectations. The more you bend to their wishes, the more they may lose respect for you. Respect isn't earned by self-sacrifice. It's earned by self-respect. When you make your happiness and sense of worth dependent on how your children respond to you, you give them control over your emotional well-being. Take Margaret's story as an example. Margaret was a strong and independent woman in her younger years, but as she grew older, she started rearranging her life to accommodate her children. She stayed silent when they spoke down to her, avoided expressing her true feelings to avoid conflict, and adjusted her schedule to meet their needs. Margaret thought that by keeping the peace, she was holding the family together. But what actually happened was that her children started seeing her as someone whose opinions and time didn't matter. They expected her to adjust and comply without question. The turning point came when Margaret realized that trying to please her children was not creating closeness. It was creating resentment. She started setting boundaries and saying no when it didn't align with her needs. She stopped trying to earn their love and instead focused on regaining her sense of self. Over time, her children started seeing her differently. They began to respect her more, not because she demanded it, but because she showed them through her actions that her time, feelings, and opinions were valuable. The lesson here is clear. Stop seeking approval from your children. Your worth is not measured by how much you give or how well you accommodate their needs. Set boundaries, express your opinions, and don't be afraid to put your own needs first. When you start respecting yourself, your children will follow your lead. Respect begins with self-respect, and when you stop seeking their approval, you'll be surprised at how quickly their respect returns. Number 2, leading by example is one of the most powerful ways to earn respect from your children. When your children start treating you with less consideration or dismiss your opinions, your first instinct might be to argue or demand that they listen. But respect isn't earned through confrontation. It's earned through the way you carry yourself and the way you respond to difficult situations. The truth is, respect is not something you can force. It's something you inspire through your actions. When your children speak to you disrespectfully or disregard your advice, it's tempting to respond with anger or frustration. But meeting disrespect with anger only reinforces the idea that they have power over you. Instead of trying to win their respect through words, demonstrate it through your behavior. When you carry yourself with calm confidence, speak with clarity, and maintain your composure, you send a powerful message that you respect yourself enough not to engage in unnecessary conflict. Take Frank's story as an example. Frank was a retired teacher who had spent his life leading a classroom with authority and confidence. But at home, his grown children had started treating him like an afterthought. They ignored his advice, interrupted him when he spoke, and even laughed when he tried to offer guidance. At first, Frank argued back. He tried to remind them of all the sacrifices he had made and demanded that they show him more respect. But the more he argued, the less they listened. Frank's breakthrough came when he realized that fighting for respect wasn't working. He decided to change his approach. Instead of arguing, he started listening. Really listening. When his children interrupted him, he would calmly say, "I'll continue when you're ready to listen." When they dismissed his opinions, he responded with quiet confidence. "You don't have to agree with me, but I expect to be heard." He stopped trying to prove himself and instead focused on carrying himself with quiet strength and dignity. Over time, his children's behavior began to shift. They started listening more closely, seeking his advice, and treating him with greater respect. The lesson here is clear. Respect isn't demanded. It's inspired. When you meet disrespect with calm authority rather than frustration, you show your children what strength and dignity look like. Lead by example by maintaining your composure, speaking with clarity, and refusing to engage in pointless arguments. When you hold your ground with grace and confidence, your children will notice, and over time, their respect for you will grow naturally. Number 3, letting go of emotional dependence is one of the hardest yet most important steps toward regaining respect from your children. As parents, it's natural to want to feel valued and appreciated by your children. However, when you start relying on them for emotional fulfillment, seeking their approval, affection, or attention, the dynamic of the relationship shifts. Instead of strengthening the bond, it creates pressure and tension, which can ultimately lead to resentment or emotional distance. Children, even when they love you deeply, respect those who are emotionally independent. When they sense that you depend on them to feel happy or validated, they may start to feel burdened rather than loved. Over time, this can make them withdraw or even treat you with impatience. The more you seek their attention, the less likely they are to give it freely. The key is to shift your emotional center away from your children and focus on finding fulfillment within yourself. Helen's story is a perfect example of this. Helen was a devoted mother who had given everything to her children. As they grew older and became busy with their own lives, Helen found herself waiting by the phone, hoping they would call. When they didn't, she would reach out, often too frequently, reminding them how much she missed them and asking when they would visit. But instead of bringing her children closer, this made them pull away. Her calls became an obligation rather than something they looked forward to. One day, Helen decided to make a change. She stopped waiting by the phone and began focusing on her own life. She picked up new hobbies, started socializing more, and even traveled with friends. She took care of her own happiness instead of relying on her children to provide it. Something remarkable happened. Her children started calling more often. They became curious about her life and began respecting her time. Instead of feeling pressured to engage with her, they now looked forward to connecting with her. The lesson here is simple but powerful. The less you depend on your children for emotional fulfillment, the more they will value your presence. When you show that you are capable of standing strong on your own, that your happiness isn't dependent on them, they will start to respect you not out of obligation, but because they admire your strength and independence. Emotional independence creates a healthier dynamic where love and respect are freely given, not demanded. Let go of the need for constant validation. Focus on building a fulfilling life outside of your children, and watch as their respect and appreciation naturally grow. Number 4, setting boundaries and enforcing them is crucial for maintaining respect and healthy relationships with your children. As parents, it's natural to want to keep the peace and avoid conflict with your children, especially as they grow older. However, when you consistently allow them to dismiss your opinions, speak to you disrespectfully, or take advantage of your time and generosity, you unintentionally teach them that this behavior is acceptable. Over time, this erodes the foundation of respect and creates an imbalance in the relationship. Respect is not something that can be demanded. It must be earned through consistency and self-respect. Setting boundaries means clearly defining what kind of behavior is acceptable and what isn't, and more importantly, following through when those boundaries are crossed. Many parents hesitate to enforce boundaries because they fear it will create distance or resentment. However, the opposite is often true. When you establish limits and uphold them with calm confidence, you teach your children that your time, feelings, and opinions matter. This in turn fosters greater respect and understanding. Take Robert's story as an example. Robert was a successful businessman who had spent years leading a company with confidence and authority. But at home, he struggled to maintain the same level of respect with his adult children. They would interrupt him when he spoke, dismiss his concerns, and even criticize his life choices. At first, Robert tolerated it, convincing himself that it wasn't worth the fight. But over time, he realized that every time he allowed this behavior to go unchecked, he was reinforcing the idea that his thoughts and feelings were not important. One day, Robert decided to change his approach. When his son interrupted him, he calmly said, "I'll continue speaking when you're ready to listen." When his daughter dismissed his opinion, he responded, "You don't have to agree with me, but I expect you to treat me with respect." And when they continued to push his limits, Robert made it clear that if they couldn't treat him with basic respect, he wouldn't engage with them or spend time together. At first, his children were surprised and even resistant, but over time they began to adjust. They started listening more attentively and speaking with more consideration. By setting boundaries and calmly enforcing them, Robert reclaimed his position as a respected figure in his family. The lesson is clear. If you want your children to respect you, you need to teach them how. Respect starts with self-respect. When you value your time and emotional well-being enough to set boundaries and stand by them, your children will begin to see you differently. They will respect you not because you demanded it, but because you showed them how you deserve to be treated. Number 5, stop giving without appreciation is a powerful lesson that many parents learn the hard way. As parents, it's natural to want to give your children everything, your time, energy, money, and emotional support, even when it's not acknowledged or appreciated. The instinct to give often stems from love and a desire to make their lives easier. However, when this generosity becomes expected rather than valued, it creates an unhealthy dynamic where giving is no longer seen as an act of love, but as an obligation. Over time, this can lead to feelings of resentment and emotional imbalance. George's story illustrates this reality well. George had always been a generous father, helping his children financially whenever they needed it, rearranging his schedule to accommodate their plans, and stepping in to solve their problems without hesitation. He believed that by being available and supportive, his children would appreciate him more and develop a deeper sense of connection. But instead of gratitude, George was met with entitlement. His children rarely said thank you. When he didn't immediately respond to their requests, they became frustrated. Worse yet, when George eventually needed help himself, they were too busy. This pattern continued until one day, George realized that he had been giving too much without receiving even basic acknowledgement in return. He decided to make a change. He stopped offering help before it was asked. He no longer rearranged his life to accommodate his children's schedules. And most importantly, he started saying no when he needed to protect his own time and energy. At first, his children were confused and even irritated. They were used to George always being available, always saying yes. But over time, something remarkable happened. As George became less available, his children began to appreciate his time more. They started recognizing that his support was not a given, but a gift. They became more thoughtful in their requests and more grateful when he helped them. By valuing himself and setting limits on his generosity, George taught his children that his time and support were not to be taken for granted. The truth is, when you give without appreciation, you don't strengthen the relationship, you weaken it. When your children expect your help rather than appreciate it, the dynamic shifts from love to obligation. The solution is not to stop giving altogether, but to give mindfully. Offer support when it's needed and deserved, but don't overextend yourself in the hope that it will earn you respect or love. When you teach your children that your generosity is conditional on respect and appreciation, they will value it more, and they will value you more in return. Number 6. Building a life outside of your children is one of the most empowering steps a parent can take, especially as they grow older. Many parents devote their entire lives to raising their children, making them the center of their world. Sacrificing personal desires and ambitions for the sake of their family becomes second nature. But as children grow up and start their own lives, this dynamic changes. If you've structured your life entirely around your children, you might find yourself feeling lost or empty when they become independent. Worse yet, if your happiness seems entirely dependent on their attention or approval, they may start feeling pressured or even burdened by your emotional reliance. Eleanor's story illustrates this challenge well. After her husband passed away, Eleanor focused all her attention on her children. She would check in constantly, offer advice even when it wasn't asked for, and expect regular calls and visits to fill the emotional void left by her husband's absence. But instead of bringing her children closer, this behavior drove them away. Her children began to feel suffocated and started distancing themselves. Calls became shorter, visits less frequent. Eleanor felt rejected and alone, even though her intentions were rooted in love. Everything changed when Eleanor made a conscious decision to reclaim her life. She joined a local book club, started traveling with friends, and volunteered at a community center. Instead of waiting for her children to give her life meaning, she created her own sense of purpose. Slowly but surely, her children noticed the change. They started calling more often, not out of obligation, but out of genuine curiosity and admiration for the life Eleanor was building for herself. They respected her independence and found themselves drawn to the strength and fulfillment she radiated. This shift teaches a powerful lesson. People respect those who have their own sense of purpose and fulfillment. When you rely on your children to provide you with emotional stability and happiness, you unintentionally create pressure and imbalance in the relationship. But when you cultivate your own interests, maintain your independence, and live a full and meaningful life outside of them, you become a figure of strength and admiration. Building a life outside of your children doesn't mean you love them any less. It means you respect yourself more. When your children see you as someone who stands on their own, who has passions and a sense of purpose beyond them, they will naturally be drawn to you. They will respect you, not because you demand it, but because they see you as someone who commands it through the way you live your life. An important message for older adults is the value of self-respect and independent living. As you enter the later stages of life, the relationship between parents and children often shifts. Many parents, in the hope of gaining their children's attention and care, are willing to sacrifice, give in, and even suppress their own opinions. However, respect does not come from unconditional giving. It comes from self-respect and knowing how to set boundaries. When you stop seeking approval, you begin to regain control over your life. Don't be afraid to say no when necessary and express your opinions without fear of judgment. Additionally, build a fulfilling life outside of your children. Pursue personal interests, connect with friends, and engage in community activities. When you demonstrate confidence and independence, your children will begin to view you with greater respect and admiration. Respect does not come from overgiving. It comes from knowing your own worth and living a full, happy life.